Welcome to another edition of our SKUFood Recipes for Success, which are presented by FCC. We're so excited to present this series to you where it's our opportunity and privilege to actually give back to food and beverage producers and processors during these challenging times. And since the middle of March, people have had to adapt and figure out a different way to do business. And our SKUFood Recipes for Success presented by FCC are our way to try and share some insights. And this week, we're going to talk about social media. And that is a topic that should be on everybody's mind because there are so many people at home. There are people on their phones a lot more, and we need to be able to connect with them. And we also need to be able to get our items on the shopping list before they get to the store. And social media can play an integral role in that. So this week, I'm really excited to welcome Brent Martell. And Brent is the Director of Digital Strategy for Balance Creative. And he's with us here today. And I'm really excited to have the chance to share some of his insights and let him really explain some of the great things going on in social media. And I'm just making him a co-host so he can join us in now. And Brent, we should be able to see you there now. So welcome to our Recipe for Success. There you are. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
And Brent's a digital expert, and with a focus on websites and digital marketing strategies that most importantly deliver business results. And that was one of the reasons that I was really happy and excited when Brent agreed to join us today, because he does focus on results. And I think that's so important. And he brings over 13 years of experience running a team of digital experts focused on strategy and execution of marketing automation and UX, web design, web development, SEO, and SEM. Now, that's a lot of initials, Brent. So I hope maybe a little later on you'll be able to shed some light and help me understand some of those great initials there.
Well, I benefit from the advantage of a team behind me that know a lot of those acronyms, so I get to steal them from their knowledge and put it into my bio. So absolutely.
Good, great. No, well, we really appreciate you taking time, and I know it's been really busy for you since the onset of the pandemic, when so many companies have gone back and said, oh, all that digital stuff I was supposed to be doing, I need to really focus on that now. So I know that it's been really busy for you, so we appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Yeah, very busy, lots of pivoting and repivoting across the board, so having to be very kind of reactionary to everything that's going on, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we're going to dive in and talk about some of those great things going on, and for those of us, who are trying to communicate with customers and consumers, and the same thing for us here at SKUFood, which is positioned as an online community for food and beverage producers and processors. So we've had to change how we communicate with people. And since the middle of March, I've had to park my shopping cart and no more speaking events across the country. And it's really just me working in my office. But we've been really busy at SKUFood because a lot of people have, as Brent said, pivoted and changed and had to adapt. So we've been trying to work hard with producers and processors. And one thing about our Recipes for Success every week is we really encourage you to participate. And we're here, we want to provide some value to you. And obviously we create some content that's designed specifically for food and beverage. But if you've got a question, you've got a comment, we want to hear about it. So just put them into that Q&A at the bottom, and we'll take a pause probably 3 or 4 times during the hour today and address some of those questions that you have. And it's really meant to be about content that helps you. So if you've got questions, by all means, put them in, and I'll keep an eye on that. And we are recording the session today, and we do make it available to our members within SKUFood afterwards. So if they want to go back and check some of it and use some of all the great ideas that Brent's going to share with us today. So it is as a resource for our members. And it's been great to partner with FCC on our SKUFood Recipes for Success. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with FCC, and really they're the only Canadian lender that's 100% invested in Canadian food and agriculture. And they really do understand your business. And it's for me, they're really been a great partner to work with on our Recipes for Success. And they can really help you in a diverse part of your business. They work with artisanal businesses right up to global exporters. So they really understand the food industry from from one part to another. They can help you with logistics. They can help you with expansions. They can help you with looking at processing and figuring out how to take it to the next level. So I really encourage you to check out the services that they offer. And I know that they have a lot of people across the country who are really interested in working with producers and processors. So I would encourage you to talk to them. And it's great to talk with a lending institution that understands food. And I think that's really such a key part of it. And they do work with people at every stage of that life cycle. So look forward to hearing about how that interaction can work with FCC. And it's talking about social media today, Brent. I think that one of the things for me when I think about social media is I probably have limited my definition of what social media is. And I probably would be guilty of thinking it's just the application. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that sort of broad definition of social media, and how do you interpret it?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. So most people, they think of social media, they think about Facebook, they think about the CNN sequences about Zuckerberg sitting in front of Congress defending all of the privacy approaches and everything that's going on in the media around that. From a business perspective, when we think about social media, we see it really as a cog in something larger that we typically call content marketing. And so this is all about getting content in front of your customers in a way that is going to engage them. Traditional media has always been a similar beast in terms of, we're trying to inject ourselves into the lives of the people that we're trying to sell to, right? Whether that's running a billboard along the side of the highway, or in a bus shelter, or radio spots or TV spots. The idea has always been the same, that we're trying to get our brand and our presence in front of the consumer, whether that's for engaging the consumer directly or for supporting your supply chain, right? And in the context of producers and processors, these products end up with the consumer eventually, and we need to support the retailers that are downstream and demonstrate that at the same time. So it's really taking everything that we've always done and translating it into this thing we call social media, which really, I think, turns a kind of one-to-many conversation into a more personal one-to-one communication. So you still kind of put the information out there on social media platforms, the examples you gave, Facebook, Instagram. If you have teenagers, you've heard of TikTok, and you've got Snapchat and all of these other platforms in the mix. So platforms are less important. It's more about this idea of two-way communication, and it's no longer just blasting the masses, but really kind of getting a tailored conversation going and enabling us to track things. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later, in new and better ways, so we can spend our money in a smarter way as well.
Right. And so that social part of it for you is about sharing the content that we have and the two-way conversation. And I think people have to be prepared for that two-way conversation.
Yep.
If they're going to be engaged in social media, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest mistakes we see people, organizations making, is they think, I'm going to come up with some great posts and I'm going to put them out there and everyone's going to love me. And often what happens is, they're not staffing a position, or whether that's outsourced or insourced, making sure there's someone available to have the conversation. So all too often you see organizations spending good amount of money producing video, producing all sorts of great content, sticking it out there. People are commenting and engaging, and it's like, it's echoes, right? You hear the crickets. No one's answering, no one's engaging, right? So the other half of it is really important.
So they have to be prepared to put the resources behind answering and being a part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so there's so many opportunities out there where we can hang out on social media. So for food and beverage processors, how do they figure out where they should be?
Yeah, and all too often you get people saying, I need to do Facebook. And that's almost a bit of a misstep, right? Because what you really want to start with is what are our goals? Who are we trying to talk to? Different demographics are engaging in different ways on different social networks, right? We've got, we'll say the older crowd now. It was brand new when I was in university, right? Just getting invented on Facebook. But now it's, the kids are, not cool if they're on Facebook. But so there's different ages and demographics that fit the different channels. And that's almost should be a secondary conversation. The first thing you want to do is, who am I trying to speak to? How? What's my message going to be? And then what you do is when you have your personas identified, you align channels to each one of those. And this is something as marketers we've always done with all of these physical channels that I talked about before. You might put your radio spot on a particular radio station because the demographic fits, and it's no different. There's this cycle and the ability to have a continued conversation that I think social media adds a dimension to all of this. But other than that, it's classic. And for some reason, people do approach it and think of it differently. I need to do Facebook. And the first thing is okay, well, who are you trying to talk to? What age group, what genders, what interests, that sort of thing, right? And then let's get the content in front of them and have that conversation in the right space.
It's amazing how much in our food and beverage industry, and a lot of other industries too, goes back to having that well-defined vision of your target market. And often when I have the opportunity to work with different producers and processors, I say, okay, we can't go any further until you tell me who's going to buy this, who's going to consume it. And they're like, well, everybody loves it. And I go, yeah, well, maybe not. So it is so important to have that really buttoned down definition of your target market. But once they do that, and we'll assume that they're all good and that they've got that done, how do they understand the audience on these different platforms? So how do you figure out? So if I say I've narrowed my target market to women 19 to 34, people who are interested in health, people who want to eat a healthy diet, perhaps a young family, something. So once you define all that, how do I figure out where those people are hanging out or what the audience is on these platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the demographic you're describing, if we were working with a client, we would likely, and especially in food and beverage, we would start in the Facebook, Instagram realm is where we would position.
So they were right. It was Facebook.
It was right. I was lead with that, and then say, well, yeah, it is actually Facebook. But in a lot of, we work with B2B organizations that are outside food and beverage. A lot of times, LinkedIn is the right space, and actually, there's an important play for any B2B kind of, bottom of the supply chain organizations. That LinkedIn is an important, often missed piece of this. And so you'd want to identify, we're going to engage with the end consumer, the people who are consuming our products at the end of the day. They're not necessarily our direct customers, but we need to engage with them, create brand awareness so they're going to buy our products, at retail or consuming the food in a restaurant that we're supplying to, however that kind of fits together. There's a dimension of supporting your supply chain and having conversations with your actual direct customers, and LinkedIn can be a powerful platform for that as well. So this is looping back to our persona discussion, right? We want to talk to our consumers, and we do lots of work figuring out who's going to buy this thing at the end, right? Who's going to consume it at the end of the supply chain. But you also have, who are the distributors? Who are the retailers that I'm going after? You need to have a similar but different conversation with those folks on LinkedIn, perhaps, right? Where you can build up a network, a professional network, and the content that you're sending over, your direct-to-consumer channels, you can talk about what you're doing there in a different context to your LinkedIn audience, for example. And so you can actually tailor each channel to the messaging that you need to give for each one of those customers, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think that is such a critical point for food and beverage because, and it's something that I go on probably a lot about, is that we have two masters to satisfy in this business because there are very few producers and processors who sell 100% of their products direct to the end user. There is that customer who issues a purchase order or buys your product and then distributes it for you, whatever sort of supply chain you have set up or channel you work within. But it's appealing to both, and some needs are the same. There are some things that are consistent for both, but then there are some that are very diverse. And I think that including your customers, the retailers, in that social strategy and the end user consumer is something that will separate a lot of food and beverage from, I'll say, the crowd who are really just talking at the consumer.
Yeah, because there's two angles. You want to show them what you're doing to help support the brand, which ultimately drives messaging to consumers. But there's also value proposition that you bring to the table. You know, consumer demand is a key critical component to all of this, of course. But you know, how you do business, the value you bring to the table, how you integrate with your, you know, your supply chain partners, like those are messages that, you know, a consumer who's in the grocery store not going to care about most of that. But all too often, that messaging actually doesn't make it out of your building because you're not focused on that. And that's a really important message, because then your supply chain partners can see, or prospective supply chain partners can see that, you know, we have, you know, great consumer engagement. They're supporting that messaging. Oh, and over here, they're telling me all about, you know, how great they are to work with, and how that's going to add value to my business and drive revenue at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I think that is that to me, I hope everybody wrote that down, because that's worth the price of admission today to get that point. And it's so, and so when you're working with clients, that's something that you encourage them to look at, both those customers and consumers.
Yeah, and can we talk about sneaky tactics? Is that allowed on?
Well, I think we
So
probably could. I think I'm, you know,
you like
there's no
sneaky?
retailers on here today,
Yeah,
so
perfect.
we could talk sneaky tactics. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, with some, you know, even some brands, part of our strategy, you know, go back to the billboard on the side of the highway, right? You think that your demographics driving down that highway every day, you put it there, but you're getting a lot of eyeballs on that are never going to be your consumer, right? The teenager in the back seat, you know, driving, you know, whoever, or driving his Honda Civic down the highway, he doesn't care, right? And he doesn't do the groceries, mom does, right? So so there's this element of being able to target that we could never do before with these platforms. So we're actually able to leverage that. So let's say you're running campaigns with messaging targeted at your consumer. You can spin that and target, you know, 1 mile radius around a given retailer's head office, for example, where you know that the buyers work, right? And be strategic about getting your consumer-facing messages in front of the people that are your buyers, right? And what this does is it allows them to see, hey, look, this brand's really pushing things, right? Like I'm in some office tower in Toronto and I'm seeing these ads, right? And it could be a really tiny ad budget because we're going for this tiny little circle, right? And in a specific location. So you can kind of mix and match these tactics to do a little bit of a look what I'm doing type message to that kind of channel audience, I'll call them as well.
And I think that is so brilliant, because when, especially regional brands who have a hard time, I mean, if we're talking Coke or Kraft,
yeah,
they've got the money, they've got the reach to get, you know, to everywhere. But when you're a smaller, either a niche or a regional brand, you don't have always the ability to do that. And if you're only in Western Canada, but now with a lot of our retailers who have a national structure, you can just do exactly what Brent just told you to do, and your category manager is going to say, "Holy smokes! Wow, they're really out there." And I think it's so clever. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's really another gem that people really need to consider. And like you said, it's a very tight ad spend as well. So I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and you know, not everyone. Yeah, you're not always going to have, you know, $3 million to go, you know, nationwide on a demographic, and so the geo targeting and being very specific and deliberate allows you to kind of keep that nice and focused. Absolutely, and I like that. We'll call it clever instead of sneaky. So
well, it all depends on who we're talking to, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I don't see any questions yet. So I think what you're doing is you're giving them so much that people are writing things down and not asking some questions. But I'll keep an eye on things. If we get some questions coming up, we'll take a pause. But what I wanted to ask you about now was one of the big draws on social media, even for a business owner like myself, is that it's free. I can put stuff on LinkedIn anytime I want. I can, you know, communicate with my community that way. Just this week, I posted a photo of some steaks that were at one of our local stores here that were from product of Mexico, which we never see in Canada under sort of, we'll call it normal circumstances. So people are, you know, things are changing and people have to adapt. So, and that one had a lot of views because I think people were shocked by it. So I just wanted to ask you about the free side of social media, and do you think it's still effective, and maybe some examples of something that you've worked with that you see as a win?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the big caveat that we need to, you know, you need to talk about when you talk about free social media, or sometimes you'll hear it referred to as organic social media. So this is essentially where you don't have to put ad dollars behind it. You post it on your business page and you let your circle share it, and that's how it gets traction. So it's great. This is effective. The big thing to be careful of is that free element, because it does take a lot of time and resources to kind of produce your content. Make sure you've got a good strategy, and that element, that backside element of a conversation component that we've seen again and again, where companies put a lot of front end resources into producing their content, distributing it over free channels. But you know, there's no one in the office to answer the questions, have the conversation, especially if you have great content take off. You could have hundreds of questions coming in, right? And comments, and just having somebody go through and like those comments, it makes people feel acknowledged, and you know, your brand is present. You know, someone might post, you know, I bought this product in the store and I got home and it had mold on it. How do you respond to that, right? Because, you know, just letting that sit there without a response can be damaging, right? So the free aspect we need to be careful of. At the same time, you know, anyone who's, you know, done marketing in school, it's the 5X rule, right? It's 5 times more expensive to get a new customer than you know, build on and retain an existing. And so that is that circle that we have. And word of mouth has always been a thing, right, with any brand in traditional marketing, and it's so much more powerful with social media. And so that's really the dimension here. We're speaking to our circle, people that follow, you know, follow the brand, engage with the brand already, and we want to provide good value-added content to them. So this shouldn't be all about how great we are all the time, right? This needs to be value-added content, industry information, other products they might like, even if you don't sell it, but it pairs well with what you have. This is the type of thing that's going to add value, you know, in the food recipes, right? That's a big one. They take off. It's kind of like that's a cheap win for any food brand. But producing good content that people can engage with, because what's going to happen is if you keep them happy, they're going to continue to be customers, but they're also going to share. It's so easy for them, right? It's not like they have to run into their friend at the store and then talk about it. There's just a click away, right, to share, like, that sort of thing. And what Facebook, to pick on them again, has done in recent years, they've actually made it more difficult for you to show up, even in your followers' feeds. So you may be following a brand and you'll actually never see any of their posts in your feeds. And this is because they've actually decreased the amount of business posts that actually show up in personal feeds. So for you to actually show up there, people need to like and engage with your content, and then Facebook deems that this is stuff you might be interested in. So just following doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up in the feeds, and that's an important component as well. So content needs to be interesting and needs to be well thought out.
All right. So now that I asked about questions, there are all kinds of them coming in here. So we're gonna take a break and maybe just address some of these and check on your deep knowledge here. So so the first question is that if you just have the free package on LinkedIn, are you allowed to use it as an advertising tool in an attempt to try to sell your product?
Yes. So it's more of a technical question. Your LinkedIn business profile, and you're thinking from the perspective of, on a personal profile, you've got kind of you can do a paid one that has more to do with how you can engage with jobs and such on there. Anybody can create a free LinkedIn ad platform account, and it doesn't matter whether you have a free or paid LinkedIn profile. And the ad account lets you run ads. You tie a credit card to it and you can run paid advertising. And that can be in the format of traditional ads, like video and image type post ads. And they also have a in-mail, which is something where you send those messages. You guys, we've all gotten them. You know, my name is Brent and I'd love to connect, and you have no idea who it is. It's those in-mail messages that come through. They're tagged, but they can message you as well. So right. Yes.
And I think though that there are different ways that you can talk about advertising as well, because part of what I would do, for example, on LinkedIn is post a lot of content, and I try to share interesting things going on in the food industry that would be interesting to be consumed by the people I'm trying to reach. And some people might say it's content, but in my world, it's also trying to promote what I do and the knowledge and the skills that I have in a little bit less overt kind of way. So, all right. So we've got another question. I'm not going to address the second one because it's about paid and targeted ads, and we're going to come back to that later. But the third one there is about, can you give me a rough breakdown of the difference in how to present your ad and the demographic or audience of Facebook and Instagram and other popular social media sites? So I think the person's looking and saying, if Facebook and Instagram are, you can use one sort of either tone or strategy. Are there other ones that would require a different strategy or maybe a different approach?
We usually treat each one completely separately. Facebook ads have the ability to, again, a little bit more of a technical, kind of a technical question, but you can align your ads to actually have different presentation on the different channels. Facebook actually has multiple dimensions. You can run it on Facebook's website, mobile, in the Facebook messaging app, and then against Instagram as well. The ads for Facebook, typically they'll just run to Instagram as is because the formats are built for that. And that is different from organic social posting, where on Instagram, the curated content or the content that you create for Instagram is very specific in how the photography is done, usually the quality, and it's less of a kind of an ad and more of a photograph that you put up and support. So it works a little differently. So it really depends on how you're structuring that. But we would typically look at messaging and language differently for Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Again, different demographics, right? Potentially. So we want to make sure that the messages are tailored. So usually we'll have writers write versions for the different platforms. Right. And that includes both copy and visual creative as well.
Right. And I think that it's important to make those investments so that it resonates. It's one thing to say, well, I did 6 posts this week, but if you're not targeting them at the right audience and they don't resonate, then it's really not, you're really not accomplishing what you think you might be. So. Mm-hmm. And we had another question about best practices about integrating CRM into social media. So I'm sure you do some work with some of those opportunities.
Yeah, tons of CRM work. We do a lot on Facebook, LinkedIn as well. They both have lead ads, which is an interesting format of ad where the person can kind of submit a lead form right within Facebook without having to leave, and you can do nice slick integrations behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. There's 2 dimensions to this. There's that front-end integration. If we don't have to have them leave their social environment, they're much more likely, and we've seen these in the stats, to engage and convert. So we'll often run opt-in contests and things like that directly there and feed the leads into the CRM, whether that's Salesforce, marketing automation platforms like Marketo or HubSpot, or even as simple as MailChimp or any one of those kind of marketing platforms. And there's direct tie-ins, so you get them in there. There's an enhanced version of all of this that works with all of these platforms where you can do audience definitions that synchronize in both ways. And this is where this gets really cool. Well, for me anyway, for the nerdy crowd. We can see through these platforms, through the CRM, and CRM's a general term. I'm talking about the larger CRMs that are kind of marketing automation CRM altogether. So it's more than just your customer database, but there's typically website tracking and stuff involved in those CRMs. So as people are engaging with your website, they're going in particular areas, you might offer many different brands. You can actually have them based in your marketing automation system, you can have them put into segments of your list based on what areas of the website they're browsing around. Wow. And then on the social media side, they synchronize. And so that list of people is actually synced as a targeted list on social media. So this is how we achieve, someone's looking at a particular area of the website, and the next day they're seeing your ad with that particular sub-brand or product visual. We've all seen this, right? We had one of partners at the agency was shopping for engagement rings all over. And then his wife went on the computer and there's like ring ads popping up. We've all experienced something like that. So you can actually leverage your CRM and social integration to achieve some really hyper targeting as a great way to engage with existing audience, show them relevant content. This is fantastic for cross-selling. If you know that they're a customer of a particular product by virtue of what they're doing on your website, well, maybe you know they're a great fit for cross-sell and awareness of some other product that you offer. So there's a lot of potential there.
Great. Okay. Yeah. And I think, yeah, it sounds interesting to me, and I'm thinking of possibilities in my mind. So that's interesting. And I'm just, there are a couple of things in the chat that, and then there are some more questions, but, and we'll keep going through some of them. But
Sure.
One of the questions or comments in the chat was just, what's the best way to address negative comments posted on social media platforms? And should we address each one individually, or general comments addressing several negative ones? And I think this is a fear that people always have about that two-way conversation.
Absolutely. So the worst thing you can do is not respond at all. I think that's pretty clear, because it looks like you don't care, or you don't know how to answer it, right? And that's just bad perception. This is complicated. This gets into PR a little bit, and there's PR strategies for different types of things. If you have a huge recall, let's talk about that scenario where it's in the media, you're getting all sorts of comments about it. That's a situation in which we would usually advise that there's a general post addressing the issue, because you're going to get tons of complaints coming through, that sort of thing. If you have the one person who picked up a package of something and it's got a little bit of mold on it and they make a comment, we would usually advise that you answer that one specifically, because that's not going to go to everyone necessarily. You don't want to go to an extra effort to highlight it. At the same time, if people stumble on the comment, you want to see that you've responded to it, and you've responded to it in a positive way. Often, offering the person to direct message, you can't necessarily do that, and there's certain technical limitations there. But if you ask them to message you, you can answer them back, to offer them product, try and engage them. And people don't know what conversation you're going to have, but they're seeing that you're doing a personal follow-up, which is fantastic. So I think there's kind of two levels of crisis mode there that you would want to handle a little bit differently in a general sense. And again, we're not a PR firm, but this is typically how we see those strategies executed on social.
Okay. Yeah. And I think I agree. I think that makes sense. And there's one more that looks like a yes or no answer. So the person's saying, can you pay your way onto people's Facebook feeds?
Yeah. Yes. If I had to say, yes, you can. So you target even individuals. So we can take, if you have an email database, for example, you can upload that list of emails to Facebook. You have to have at least, it depends on the type of ad, at least 100 or at least 300 matched. You have to have big enough sample size for Facebook to allow you to do it, but it's not very high. And you can actually run your ads specifically at those people, and you'll show up in their feeds. So absolutely.
All right, good. So we were talking about the free and about posts, and I wanted to ask you if there were any that you had that you wanted to share, that great examples of things that you think worked really well, that were really just a free post that happened in food and beverage.
Yeah, actually, we with COVID coming up, we worked with a number of clients, and with this strategy. I've got an example. I've taken some screenshots for this. We'll see if I'm able to share my screen there. So Dario, which is a sub-brand of ADL, we worked with them to as COVID kind of kicked up, trying to think of how do we continue to engage people without a lot of businesses being cautious about not wanting to look opportunistic with people, not being able to go and shop and not wanting to kind of jump on that. But this goes back to what I was discussing earlier about offering value, right? Value in context. So the idea here was we helped produce a coloring book, essentially, that was branded and themed, and then just kind of put it out there for free over free social. Didn't put ad spend behind this or anything. It was just really, and it got really good uptake, and we shared out all the different pages, right? So this is another strategy, is we produced content, and I see this done over and over again, right, where company spends a ton of money producing 12 videos and then they just throw them all out online, right? Whereas, better strategy is to take this and trickle it out. And so in this case, there were coloring pages. We trickled them out over time. So there's kind of a new page coming every week. People loved it, engaged with it. And you can see like over time kept getting added to the website, and then people were kind of sharing and being able to kind of produce that. And again, you know, offering something for people to print and, you know, something to color at home and that sort of thing. And, you know, there's nothing salesy about it. It's really about keeping the brand top of mind and doing your part to offer value to people, even in kind of, you know, strange circumstances. You know, and this is an element, this is one example, but it's always important that we tie what we're doing on social to what's happening on our website or our blog or something, right? If you say something without giving people something to go to and do, you're missing opportunity. There's always the brand awareness and getting people to share stuff, and that's great. But the more that you can get people to actually have an opportunity to do something and engage, you can create more of a lasting experience, more engagement, and you're getting those clicks and engagements that will ultimately allow you to surface up. Facebook will see that they clicked through to a link. Okay, well, there's a ton of people like this that thought it was interesting, and so they're going to open it up more. We talked earlier about, you know, sometimes even though they're following you, your post might not show up in their feed. This is how it shows up in their feed, by getting them to click on things and do something. So,
and that's really how you can measure effectiveness, right? Is when they take action from something that you've put out there.
Absolutely. So in terms of measuring, you know, measuring how effective these are, you know, you get metrics through on the landing page. You can see how many people are coming through to it, which posts kind of got the best pickup, and then this also in your CRM, linking back to that, will give you insight into, you know, which of your followers and consumers. You can actually build dynamic audiences, actually likely have children, and you may have products that are tailored. There's all sorts of creepy stuff we can do, right, on the behind the scenes to segment our customers and have more kind of realistic conversations. But yeah, measuring engagement. It's the billboard on the side of the highway. You don't know whose eyeballs actually locked on the billboard. You make estimates and that sort of thing. Similar with this, right? We know how many impressions we got on the Facebook feed, but people could have just been scrolling and not paying attention. By getting them to click, we get a sense of success, and we can measure that and get some element of KPI on it.
Right, great. And my last question about free is there ever too much? Like, can you be on there too much?
I would say no. This goes back to my previous comment about not always showing up in their feed. I think you need variety in your content. The format and the message needs to be different. You need to mix it up. And Facebook's actually going to put some of the posts in front of certain people and others in front of others. You have brands that will post, some news media brands that every 2 minutes something's going up. But you're following them, you might only see a couple a day. And the reason for that is Facebook's trying to use its data behind the scenes, and Twitter does this, and all the platforms do this to try and pick out the ones that they think you'd be interested in based on what you've engaged with in the past. So by putting out regular, consistent, value-added content, you're not spamming. And we hear this from people like clients a lot. I'm worried about spamming my followers. You're not. The only way they're going to see all of them is if they actually go to your page and look at it, at which point they're reading your content. They're not getting spammed. So this is not like emailing them 5 times a day. They're only going to see a small subset. So you want to make sure that you're speaking to all your, like if we decide we have 4 customer personas, then maybe we want to be sending 4 pieces of content out a day, perhaps, and staggered throughout the day. And you can't really overdo that. But again, you got to have the back end resources to answer questions and respond to it. So you need to scale yourself responsibly, I guess, from that perspective.
Right. All right. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk about paid advertising, because that is a big business, and a lot of these social networks are now publicly traded companies, and people are demanding a return from their investment in the company. So I'm just curious about what you think about the paid side, and perhaps some things you've seen that you see that are really effective.
Absolutely. So again, we go back to our billboards, right? And we go back to our bus shelters. It's the same thing. We're getting eyeballs on media. Social media gives us that added dimension of being able to measure something real. It's not just people who happen to walk by it, it's who actually looked at it and engaged with it. And you've seen this in physical, where they try and send you a special link on the side of the bus, or a special unique phone number is on that ad so they can try and measure, or ask for Susan when you call, right? Because that tells them, oh, they saw that TV ad and they asked for Susan. So that tactic that we try to do in traditional media is just amplified with all the technology. So all the targeting, all the data we get from the actions people are taking give us a measure of engagement. And that's typically how we measure ROI. And then we try and always pair that with some sort of action. Now, this can be a lead form, which is engaging them to give an email in exchange for a coupon or something that they can engage with. Those conversions, we call them in digital, is that action we want people to take. And so conversions are how we measure this. Now there's this element of, well, did it actually translate to dollars? And this is more challenging to do. And we've all, as marketers, had this challenge with our billboards and our paper ads and all that. How do we measure dollars? So we always try and pair that with some sort of in-store activation is a great way to do that measurement, right? Coupons, that sort of thing can give you a measure of success. When those are unique to the particular campaign you ran, then you get a sense of kind of the real dollars that you're driving at retail. So those types of tactics can be successful for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And did you had an example there that you wanted to show of a paid program that in terms of seeing something that translated into some of those results and show how that can be looked at?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can look at this Liquor Depot CFL campaign that we worked with the Liquor Depot team, and they had a partnership with the CFL. This goes back to some of the geo-targeting stuff we talked about. What did you call it, Peter? The not creepy, but
clever.
Gotta remember that word. Not so clever. So this was a combination of paid media running specifically. We can be, people who watch football also like beer. Maybe we can make that assumption. Maybe we can't. But there's some market research happening there.
You wouldn't be the first marketer to make that assumption, probably.
No. So this, the idea here was to, when you do the geo-target, a lot of people think that this is only good for local businesses. You think about, okay, I want to target people within a mile radius of my store and put ads in front of them, that sort of thing. But your geolocation is sticky. So you can actually target people who have, recently been in a location. And this is how you can target, in this particular case, it was people who had been within that 1 mile radius of the stadiums with certain demographic stuff added in and targeted this to run this ad that then, they would click on this, they'd go to a landing page, they'd give their email, and they'd get we did a test where you didn't have to give email, one where you did, just to kind of test some things, and they would get a coupon that they could bring into the store physically. So there's an ability, you scan it and it's attributed back to the campaign. So this is an example of how you can take the geo-targeting and the social strategy, have them do something that adds value, right? They get value, they're at the game, and they get to do this. And then by co-branding, there's a lot of strategies at play here that I wanted to kind of pull in, which is why it's a good example. The co-branding is immensely powerful because Liquor Depot is not only tying into, Liquor Depot, but their partnership with the teams. You've got, the CFL, and you've got each of the individual teams sharing these things.
So when people see that, if they're in Edmonton and they're an Edmonton Eskimos fan or Calgary Stampeders fan, they identify with that, right? They go, "You're with me."
They do. There's an identification aspect. Make sure we get the targeting right and we don't mix them up, because then we'll just offend everyone. But that's right. But there's also this dimension of the co-branding, and in our world, that could mean with the retailer, right? If I'm running these and we're using the logo and we have a partnership with our big retailers as well, the big retailers will be encouraged to pick that up. They'll often get tagged. We didn't need to tag them here because everything wasn't done in sync, but you can even tag the retailer. Their social people will pick up on it and reshare it, and they've got likely much bigger audience than you would. Mm-hmm. So you kind of extend your reach through that tactic as well.
And I think the other point for me on that is that it also says to the retailer that you're doing things and that you're engaging consumers on social media and understand the power of it. And it is much more powerful when you do work with somebody else. And and it could be your customer on the retailer side, or it could be a complementary brand as well, right? That where you
Yep.
could work together. So
Yeah, partnerships, right? Wine and cheese. You know, I see Lee commenting in the thing about how fabulous the dairy aisle coloring page is. Lee from ADL there, so there we go.
yeah,
But again, you know, with dairy aisle, with cheese, there's been partnerships with wine and other, right? You get people on these complementary. You need to get outside of your bubble a little bit, right? And think about the other things that interest your audience, because by putting that kind of content, you're going to engage them, and it's not just buy my stuff all the time.
right. So I'm going to just flip over to the questions for a couple of minutes here and just address, we've got 3 of them here. And so the first one says, I'm pretty confident using Facebook and Instagram paid targeted ads. I'm learning about SEO and trying to frame our website in the best way for that. But I'm really curious about SEM. Is paying Google for top search results and ads the way to go? What kind of businesses would it best suit? And any big cons to spending marketing money that way?
Yeah, so SEM is search engine marketing. So when we talk about that, everyone talks about Google search, but you know, poor Bing is there too, right? So we just generalize it to search engine marketing. This works really well. The people, if it's done right, there's a couple of angles here. People who are searching for a problem or a solution are highly ready to buy. This tends to be very effective in B2C, where someone can, you know, I'm looking for a problem, to, you know, something to solve my problem. It's definitely a longer voyage on some B2B or B2B that involves a longer supply chain, because you're not going to get that immediate action, but it can be a great way to drive brand awareness. But you have to put yourself in that context of, are people going to be searching? So this particular example with the question is, you know, it's a vegan cheese company, right? So this is a great, when you have a niche, it's a great opportunity to leverage Google search, because people who are looking for something that, you know, they're more likely to search for, that's the first thing they're going to do. And having your product come up first, you want to pair that with geo-targeting, so you're not wasting money on people outside your market. So you can be very specific, and you could put interest and demographic qualifiers around that as well. But there's a lot of value and then this is where a lot of businesses will start, because you don't have the money to invest in creative. Like, this is literally the text ads, right, that you see when you Google search. So it puts you at the top of that, it has a little ad box next to it, but other than that, it looks like a normal result. And the idea is that people can, you know, the barrier to entry is low there, because you don't have to put a bunch of money into creative, and it's a little simpler to kind of just go in with that. And often those customers are more highly, they're further along the funnel. They're kind of ready to buy. They're looking for a problem to be solved.
Right.
Defending your brand is the other element of this. You can run Google search against your brand and your competitors' brand names as well, if we go back to the sneaky elements. And this can be a good way to make sure that you are definitely coming up, especially if your brand name has some generic terms in it, right? Like if you call it like, you know, best cheese company, well, you're not going to come up first, right?
Sure.
Unless you're paying to play. So defending your brand and positioning can be good there too.
Right. Okay. So the next question is, this is a bit heavier one now for you, Brent.
Heavy questions, perfect.
it says, in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal and the Russian interference in the US election, some scholars and marketing experts have stated that since people rarely actually read articles, having a catchy headline is important to get the share, and this is actually more valuable than the like, or even the person reading your article, as it builds your interaction network and actually gets more eyeballs. They're wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this, I mean, without the Cambridge Russian kind of element to it, just on its own, getting shares is more valuable, because they're extending it to the network. With a like or just a click, they're not necessarily sharing it out. Facebook will do, you know, so-and-so liked this, and you get a little bit of that. But when someone actually shares something, it goes direct to their followers. And so there's a lot more value in that from that perspective. Having somebody click through to an article, read and engage with content, spend more than X amount of time on an article, that's a great KPI to read. Like, are they just jumping over, looking at it and bouncing? So we like to measure that stuff when we're looking at content engagement. But yeah, from the perspective of your question, I think you're absolutely right. That share is more valuable, and there's a lot of tactics, contests, right? Share and like, that sort of thing. You see a lot of them done. You have to be careful because Facebook has some rules around that type of stuff. But yeah, absolutely, there's a lot of value there.
All right. And we had one question, just they missed the definition of paid social media. And I probably didn't ask you to really define
Sure.
that one, Brent, but maybe just give a quick sort of summary of paid.
Yeah, absolutely. So social media, in a nutshell, posting posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, any of those guys. All of them will give you the ability to pay money to have that post go to more people. That's the simplest probably definition of it. So it's just taking social media and adding a paid version of that to get more reach.
Right. Okay. And I did notice that Susan added the link for our July series into the chat. So thank you, Susan, for doing that. And what I'm going to focus on in July is helping you tell your story. And I've actually been working on a project lately, and I'll tell you where this came from, is I've been working on a project lately, and I actually was a little bit frustrated that it was so difficult for me to find the story about a lot of food and beverage products that would resonate with customers and consumers. And all I could find was about the attributes of the products. And people just kept wanting to tell me what was in it or where it was made or that kind of thing, not how it benefits the consumer or benefits the customer. And that's what's going to get them to buy. So we're going to spend the Wednesdays in July. We're going to talk about telling your story. The first Wednesday of July, we have Kayla Short, who's an influencer, is going to join us. And I'm really excited to learn about that part of marketing because it's becoming something that's more and more an opportunity, but also something that's impacting the market more. And we're also going to have Carly Minish from Smack Dab Mustard join us. And she's been doing some phenomenal stuff telling her story on different platforms. So we're going to really understand from her perspective what she's doing and how she does it. And then I'm going to take 2 of the Wednesdays where you get just me, not a guest those weeks. And I'm going to tell you that doesn't sound very good. I'm going to share some insights into how you can tell your story that's going to resonate with consumers and it's going to resonate with your customers. So we're going to tackle one each week and really give you a process to work through within your own business. So looking forward to July. We're going to take the week of July 1st off because it is Canada Day. So we're going to take that Wednesday off and be back on July 8th. So hopefully you'll be able to join us in July. And Brent, I had one more question. And my last one, which if I go back to my retailer days, because I know that every producer and processor goes into a retailer's office or now on a virtual call and says, I'm doing social media. So that's great. And I think it's important. But how do you prove to them that it's leading to sales? And that's what retailers are focused on. So how do we prove to them that what we're doing is leading to sales, which benefits them in their stores or online?
Yeah, you really need to tie it back into the physical interactions and in-store activations. I mean, that's ultimately what you need to do. This is the same challenge and problem we've always had, right, with traditional media. So you get the level of engagement, and that's great. And that's a great comparative analysis between your different campaigns that you're doing, because you can measure this got more engagement than that. That's great, and you can always directly tie that to increased performance. From a sales perspective, coupons, certain in-store activations, those are the best way to get a measure. Doesn't mean that you have to do it always, but you might have measurement periods where you're engaging with that, being careful, of course, that you might drive more given that you're giving stuff away. But if you can do that just even in the simplest way, it goes a long way to demonstrating that it's driving sales for yourself and also at the retailer as well.
Right. Okay, so really measuring those engagements and when people react to what we're doing. And I think it's so important to share those results as well as just what you're doing on social media with your customers. And as Brent shared earlier on, that those are some of the great things you can talk about on LinkedIn where your customers are hanging out and you can have that communication. And one of the things that often is a challenge for producers and processors is getting attention from your customer, right? That they're busy, they don't always return your call, they don't always return your email, but if they're on LinkedIn and they see you're doing things, they're going to get the message that way. So I think it's a great tactic, and I love that one. I'm going to start trying to get people
Yeah,
going on that
and remember that your B2B customers are people at the end of the day too. So they're also going to be, on Facebook on the couch in the evening browsing that. And if you're targeting people who are recently in that 1 mile radius of their head office downtown Toronto, they might be, on the couch in Markham in the evening looking at this, and they're going to see your ad pop up, right? So you're getting visibility in the downtime, and that can be a great, powerful tool for kind of demonstrating that you're in it with them and doing your part.
I agree. So every week we wrap up our SKUFood Recipes for Success, which are presented by FCC, with some good news in the food industry. And I know there is one more question, which we will come to at the end. And if people have other questions, I'd encourage you to put them in. But I just wanted to share some of the good news things we're seeing. So Fancy Pocket, which is a bakery producer processor in Moncton, New Brunswick. It's a great bakery. They make great bagels and flatbreads and pita and naan breads. So they donated a ton of bakery products to food banks in Moncton. So we thank them for that. And I also wanted to share their post when I was looking at some of the things they were doing on social media, how they did a thank you to their staff. And I think that that's something that's so important. Their people are still coming to work through all of the challenges, and probably some of them with challenges with childcare and different things going on. So they just, posted and said thanks to their team at Fancy Pocket. So I think it's great to do that and create some pride within your team. Another thing we saw this week was Tim Hortons, a big food service operator, obviously in Canada, who's had a tough time during the whole COVID-19. But they're coming out now with a program where they want you to nominate some of the hardworking essential workers that you know, and they're going to feature them on some limited edition Tim Hortons Hero Cups. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to celebrate some of the people working in either healthcare or perhaps in the grocery stores, people who have been going to work through this and helping. And another example, which we found this week, was from Save On Foods, which is a large retailer in Western Canada. And what they're doing between June 11th and 17th is they will be donating 50% of all the proceeds, all the net proceeds from their Western family products, so their control label products, will be donated to food banks across Western Canada. So great initiative from Save On Foods, and a way to give back during some challenging times. And although Rogers are not a food company, I felt that this was worthy of noting, is that this week it was announced that Rogers have made a one-time $20 million gift to food banks across Canada. So that's a huge help to food banks who are trying to feed a lot of healthy people right now in Canada, and people who may have lost jobs and be struggling. So although, as I said, Rogers are not a food producer processor, I thought it was worthy of noting just the magnitude of that gift that they gave to food banks. And also just we talk about sometimes how people can be doing business differently. And we have a great session on June 23rd that FCC are sponsoring in partnership with Nielsen, and also a bakery showcase and the Baking Association of Canada, where it's a great session if you're in that bakery category to learn about some of the things going on with front-end data and what's happening out there. So I'd encourage you to sign up for that. It's a free session, and if you want some of the more details on that, I can always provide those to you. And as always, would want to remind you to join us next week. We've got Neil Steven here from This Is Marketing, and we're going to talk about influencers, which I think are a great opportunity for producers and processors. So I would definitely invite you to join us again next week. And maybe, Brent, if you've got another minute, we'll just take a look. I see a couple more questions that we can tackle here. So the first one is, the person said they're a food and beverage management student in Toronto. I wish they'd had that when I was going to school. I don't think they did. I had to learn it kind of at the store and on the retail side. So they're asking about the career path that one should go on to gain expertise in social media, digital marketing, and analytics. So I'll defer that one to you for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because this is harder to find than you might think when we're looking to hire. I think what's really important is having the fundamentals background in marketing and beverage management, or whatever the discipline is, and that needs to be tied to the tactics that you need to learn. And so I would pair that with, there's some great online learning. BrainStation is one. I have no connection to them. It's one that we've used with staff before. BrainStation, they have online courses around all facets of digital marketing. That can be a great way to learn the tactics that you can then pair with your real world experience. Because if you don't understand your customers, this is very difficult to do effectively. So I think you need the two together for sure.
Great. No, and then I think it's so encouraging that we have people who are want to be working in our food and beverage industry. So that's great, and I hope they do find some more information. I see a comment from Elaine just about what agency Brent is with. So they're looking to find you, Brent. So for sure, share your contact information, and
Yeah.
you can find
Absolutely. So I'm a strategy director with Balance Creative out of Halifax, and I'm also a managing partner with Incline Media in Ottawa. So I've got many hats. I'm involved with a couple of other businesses as well. It's my style and how I do that. But you can find us through Balance Creative in Halifax for sure if you're looking to have a chat.
And for anybody, Elaine or anybody, you know how to get me. It's peter@skufood.com, and I can always introduce you to Brent and share his email with you, so no problem to do that. So I don't see any more questions there, Brent, and I really appreciate you sharing some really great insights today, and how it starts so much with that target market. People got to be ready on social media if they're going to really be effective in this arena. They've got to be ready for that two-way conversation with a mix of free and also paid, but really focus on that engagement and where you're meeting those KPIs. Measure whether you're getting an impact out of the investments you're making to see if it's worth to continue, or maybe you got to change the tactics up a little bit. And I love the geo-targeting. I think that's just fantastic. And also speaking to your customers on LinkedIn about the great things you're doing with your brand are great tips for people. So
if anybody wants to run any tests, you just, we'll share Peter's address. We'll do some really weird ads geo-targeted at Peter's house, and we'll see how everyone does with that.
Perfect. I'll let you know if I see them or not. But thank you very much, Brent. As I said at the onset, I know you're busy these days, so I really appreciate you taking the hour and sharing such valuable insights with in our SKUFood Recipes for Success, which are presented by FCC. So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everybody for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. We know you're busy, and hope that some of the insights we provided today will help your food and beverage business. So thanks for being here.